Nigeria has continued to struggle for a credible and functional identity system that gives a profile of its citizens and those residing in the country. With the ongoing efforts to overcome previous challenges, the country, through the National Identity Management Commission, hosted in Abuja ID for Africa, the 4th Annual Government Forum on Electronic Identity in Africa. Now, what are the fallouts of the summit? How beneficial to Nigeria are the outcomes? And what is the future for identity management in Nigeria and Africa? This is our focus on Nigeria Today. I am Joy Osiago. Now, joining me to discuss the Identity Summit is the General Manager, Legal, Regulatory and Compliance Services, Local Organizing Committee Chairman, ID for Africa, Hadiza Ali Dangabana. Madam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's start this way. What is the state of identity management in Nigeria?
In Nigeria, we have come a long way. Like, you know, we started with the focus earlier on was on issuance of identity card. And then the government refocused and came out with the policy of identity management, which is actually what identity is all about. It's about managing identity, ensuring that there's a unique token that you can link to a person's identity. So with the new policy of government, the commission was set up, and we started with building the infrastructure. So the delay in commencing the data gathering actually was to ensure that we have the infrastructure ready to receive data that we'll send to it, and to ensure that the deduplication, to ensure a person does not have multiple identity, is put in place. So that was what we did, and then we started the data capture. It was slow because the initial plan by government was to have a public-private sector participation in the gathering of data and issuance of the ID card. But the concession failed because of the economic situation at that particular period, and NIMC had to intervene to start the data collection. It was slow, but as at 2015, we had close to 8 million records in the database. But over the years, as I speak to you now, our data has passed the 30 million record threshold. Yeah.
That's interesting. You know, one will ask, especially if you're considering the sustainable development goals and looking at goal 16, one would like to know what is the role of identity management, especially in Nigeria, if you're considering the importance of catching up with goal 16 by the year 2030.
Yes, the goal is to provide legal identity to every person on earth. That's the UN good directives. In Nigeria, we are trying to ensure that within the next 5 years, we have the whole population in the database. That's what we are working towards. And like you rightly stated, we just started discussion with the World Bank. We've reached an advanced stage. So there's going to be a support in the through an ecosystem approach that we have agreed to ensure that we have more people out there in the field to do the data capture. Right now, the Commission has about just 900 locations across the Federation where we're capturing data, and the standard is to have at least an enrollment center that does data capture for every 50,000 population. There should be an enrollment center. So that's the target we're heading to. By the end of the year, we hope to have more than 4,000 or more centers. Coincidentally, this morning we started discussion with the telcos, and we understand that they have agents that do SIM registration. So it's just for us to ensure that they follow the standard. So the number of centers may even exceed the 4,000 we are looking at in the ecosystem. You know, initially people don't want to go into these things when they have to make investment without knowing how they are going to recoup their investment. So with the support of the World Bank, the support is not coming to NIMSI directly. The support is what they term plug and play. An agent or a licensee invest in equipment that has been standardized by the Commission, and then we assess those facilities, we license them, and once the person starts to generate data from that enterprise, is sent to the database. The agent will not retain the data. We will license them to capture data within the international standard that has been set by the Commission. So they send the data to us. Once that data generate a successful national identification number, which is the identity token, then a fee will be attached to it. And from there, the investor will be able to recoup the investment that they will be making into the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is both private, even our public enterprises that are into data generation one way or the other. The collaboration is to license them to capture data. For example, if you require service from, you require to get your driver's license and you don't have the NIM. When you get to driver's license office and you don't have the NIM, they should be able to register you for the NIM and send to our database and continue with their normal processes. So we don't want to leave anyone out in that process. Yeah.
All right. I would like us to also look at the issue from a wider perspective. Now, looking at it from the African continent as a whole, not just Nigeria. And I want us to look at the challenges of identity management, and especially how it concerns cybersecurity. I know that you just had a conference that ended recently. How is that? What are we looking at in terms of the challenges, not just now focusing on Nigeria, but African continent as a whole? Okay,
the challenge is uniform. It's just that some countries, the challenge is more kind of pronounced than in others. From what I took from the conference, because all the countries, 47 African countries that were at the conference, there were presentations from multiple countries. So you get to hear the different challenges experienced by others, and then some of them share experience on how they came about or resolved their challenges, especially in terms of when you look at civil registration or birth registration. We've had tremendous progress in some smaller African countries in the solutions they use, kind of customizing those solutions to their peculiarities, and they have achieved tremendous success. In Nigeria, we are the largest in Africa, and the rest of Africa look up to us to see how we progress in this sector. And it was quite an experience for us to share the experiences we've had in harmonization. Harmonization is more costly than even going out to do the fresh data generation. As I said earlier, we are just trying to get this sector sanitized, to ensure that there are standards, there are regulations, that it will guide every business or every entity going into the data culture, to make sure that when we are harmonizing, it will kind of be easier for us when we are using the same standards. But as we are not using the same standards, if we take the example of the biometric data capture, we are taking the whole 10 fingers. We take facial, and we have capacity to even activate our iris on our back end. But you find out that only 1 or 2 agencies in government in Nigeria are taking the 10 fingerprints. And then some of them may take the fingerprints, but the picture quality are different. So unless we standardize the whole sector to make sure that there is uniformity in the standards that we use for the different sectors, then the challenges will continue. But with the harmonization process going on right now, and with the political backing we've had, whereby the Vice President chairs the harmonization committees and has brought all the other chief executives of the other agencies to the same table to discuss and ensure that this is government directive now and everybody has voted into it. So it's kind of working for us. And we shared that experience with our sister African countries.
Okay, looking at the issue of harmonization, you've been talking about harmonization. Now, I want us to also look at this summit, this conference, ID for Africa. Yeah. What are some of the issues that ID for Africa addressed? I mean, I know that the theme is related to harmonization of identification schemes. Let's have you talk more about that.
Okay, the ID for Africa is a movement. It's a movement that started 4 years ago. The first movement was went to Tanzania. The second was in Kigali, Rwanda, and then Namibia last year, and here we are in Nigeria. Every year there's a theme for each of the conference, and for the host country they look at the key activities that is going on in that country and for that particular year. So this year, like I rightly stated, the hype is on harmonization in Nigeria, and we had to discuss our challenges and experiences so that other African countries that are about to go into harmonization will learn from us. Next year is on the ecosystem. South Africa has gone a bit, they are about 50 million, but they have captured close to 70% of their population. Mm-hmm. And the ecosystem, Nigeria will have a lot of story to tell in 2019 on the ecosystem, because that is exactly what I earlier discussed when we started this program about the partnership between the public-private sector and where the World Bank and other developing countries are coming in. And the interesting thing is on harmonization is we are talking about harmonizing identities in Nigeria. Even the development partners realize that they've been funding different projects in different agencies. You know, they were operating as silos too. The World Bank will operate, fund this project in this agency, UNDP will be in another, and then they were not looking at what each other was doing. But because of this harmonization, they came together to harmonize their own support. So they are coming collectively together. It's not only the World Bank that is funding the ecosystem, there's a portion coming from the French Development Agency, from UNDP, from it's a multi-international agency corporation that is even seen there. So they too are harmonizing themselves to make sure that what they do, you know, there's benefit in their support.
All right, we'll still continue with the issue of harmonization, but let's take a short break. The program is Nigeria Today, and we have been looking at identity management in Nigeria and indeed Africa. We'll take a break now. There will be more you need to know after the break. Stay with us.
Coming up on NTA News 24, Nigeria Today, 7:30, Monday to Friday, with exciting anchors on topical issues. Inspirators, a search for those who inspire others. Business 24, a business magazine program. Late edition repackaged. Fresh and exciting programming on NTA News 24. Stay with us.
We thank you for staying with us. Now, Madam, we're talking about the issue of harmonization, and you brought an interesting angle towards it. I mean, the issue of partnership and the need for countries to also work together in one accord on the African continent. I want us to look at, will this harmonization process solve the problem of poor identity management on the continent?
It will, because You know, in West Africa, there's the ECOWAS standard that they are trying to enforce to ensure that there is uniformity in data collection within the West African region. And I'm sure in East Africa too and North Africa they will have the same thing. Looking back home, harmonization would clearly will reduce that issue of lack of identification. You know, the problem we have is we are going about it top bottom instead of bottom up, because already all these different identity tokens you have in the market are more of functional in nature. They were derived because of the gap that we had in having an identity database. So the BVN was started because there's no token for a person to identify. So the banking sector felt for them to do their KYC, they need to build their own database and so forth. When you look across MNOs too, the telcos, is the same story that you see. So what we are trying to do is to make sure that we do the right thing, to make sure that we build the foundation identity, which is identifying that person that is coming before you for any service. And that identity token is the national identification number. It's not the card that gives a person identity. A card is an added token that you can perform other additional services. But your identity is that number, whether you present it on a piece of paper or you have it stored on your phone, or you cram it and you can say it, or even if you cannot even remember it, when you go for a service and you have already registered in the national database to provide maybe your demographics, your name, first name, second name, or your phone number you use in registering, or any of your biometrics, any of your fingerprints. And once a verification is done and you are in that database, it will bring up your identity token. So that is identity management. Identity management is not issuing a card and it ends. No, it has to be a live system that can be subjected to auditing, that can be subjected to authentication and verification. That is what an identity management is.
All right, I want you to still go back to the issue of cybersecurity and this particular summit that just ended. How was that addressed, especially if you look at it as a huge challenge on the African continent, not just Nigeria?
Okay, it's not only about, surprisingly, from the discussion we had from both the international community that were present there and even the vendors that are into the different softwares and other IT security features, is that it's not an African issue, it's an international issue. But the most important thing is to make sure that you put this right safeguard in your database from the point of collection, to make sure that there's you don't give access or room for penetration of the channels by which you communicate that data, and the database to make sure that all the necessary security, physical and logical, are in place. That's what it is. And for the country to make sure that there is a data protection law, because it's a different thing when you protect it and when there's penetration of that your data, you don't have any law to safeguard that data. You don't have any law to punish the perpetrators of those acts, you know, or even how to control it. So in Nigeria, we don't have kind of a code that is termed as Data or Protection or Privacy Act. We do not have it, but it's work in progress, because I know there's a bill before the National Assembly. NIMSI too has sponsored a bill about 5 years ago. We had a committee that harmonized it with another sponsored bill from the House, and just recently the Senate sent us a draft of another bill that was done on the subject matter. We made our own presentation with what we had earlier presented to them, and the committee asked us to go back and work with the other agencies that were there, because to work as the lead agency to arrange for a meeting to make sure that that draft is finalized and resubmitted to the National Assembly. So we are working in that. But in the meanwhile, in the absence of that the Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act of 2015 is will take care of the gaps that we have for now.
So listening to you talk, it is obvious that NIMSI is aware of the challenges and also the routes on how to get out of this problem. So what is NIMSI doing to ensure that we walk the talk? Cybersecurity is, or fraud, whatever it is, it's an ongoing thing. You have to always be ahead of the perpetrators. So it's continuous training, continuous check, continuous upgrade of our security facilities, logical and physical, continuous. It's a continuous thing. It's a never-ending thing, because you have to always be a step ahead. Like I said, because the perpetrators are always step ahead of you. So even within us in the commission, we have a team of our staff that are trained to even try to attempt to hack the system, so that they behave like the intruders, to hack the system and then to see what are the vulnerabilities, how do you prevent them, how do you cut those things. Yeah. Well, I know that ID for Africa is working very hard in partnership with African countries involved to see how they can achieve their goal. How far have they gone in terms of achieving their objectives? I think they have done beyond expectations. And one thing I know that even the management of IT for Africa expressed before they left this morning was that Nigeria was an overwhelming success for them. They were able to reach larger participants from 90 countries. Almost all the African countries were here. We had 47 of them, high-level delegation. And in each of the countries that are coming, like in African countries, it's not only one agency that attends. All the agencies that are into data capture or one form of data usage or the other were here. And then the exhibitors, we were able to see new technologies. And for us in Nigeria, the beauty of it was that we brought an international exposition into Nigeria that you have never seen before. The number of vendors, the number of solutions we have, latest solution that you can find in any part of the world, we brought it to Nigeria. And the level of participation, because I know most agencies, when they came, their representative came and reported, even the high-level VIPs that came, the number of requests to send in their staff that have not even registered for the conference, that are into their IT, their security and all that, was very, very high. And it was an opportunity even for our startup companies, IT startup companies, to come in and see what is there in the market and how they can even develop their own products. So it was an overwhelming success. So in your perspective, from what we have going, is it possible for us to catch up with goal 16 of SDG by the year 2030? I'm referring to Nigeria now. Very possible, because, the challenge with the Commission was having the funding to do the data capture. Now we are having international support, multi-agency support coming to support us to pay. The reservation has always been, why should I come as a private company to do it? Where am I going to recoup my investment? So how are we doing with the funding? Let's get to that quickly, because time is against us. The ecosystem I spoke about, these agencies are not coming to give money to NIMSI to say do this, do this. What they are looking at our infrastructure. What are the gaps? Where do we need to expand to add to what you have? That is what we are gaining from that. And in the field, what do you need? You have shortage of enrollment locations. Okay, license. Let's get partners that will do it for you. We are looking at countries like India. India has registered over 1 billion people. They are the largest population. It's one of the most successful registration that has happened in the world. So we are trying to adopt something similar to the Indian, to say, okay, smaller business, that can have that reach to the hinterland, to where the population is. Because as we are now, it's the cities and, mostly in the cities, the elites that knows what is going on. So the real people that will need to be identified,
you know, there's still that gap. So how do we reach them? So under the ecosystem, if I have 5,000 people going out there to do registration, they know that if they invest 2 to 3 million, you know, in equipment to do the enrollment, within 6 months they can recoup their investment, and within the remaining 2.5 years, it's profit all the way.
So are we working towards reaching those at the grassroots?
Exactly, that's the whole ecosystem, to make sure that every Nigerian living in Nigeria, a legal resident, is captured. So the target is 3 to 5 years. 3 years, we hope to capture more than 80% of the population. In the next 5 years, the 100%, and then, you know, identity management. New children are being born, people are dying. So you need to have the ability to work, for us to work. It's a partnership with Population Commission. Part of the support, the two of us will have to work together. When they first came, they said, unless NIMSI, Population Commission, INEC come together to work as one, they will not provide support. So that collaboration between those agencies is ongoing.
All right. I want to thank you, Hadiza Ali Dagabana, the General Manager, Legal, Regulatory and Compliance Services Local Organizing Committee and Chairman, ID for Africa. Thank you very much for coming into your studio and contributing to this topic today. And on that note, we conclude this edition of Nigeria Today, the last one for the week. My name is Joy Osiago. Join us Monday for another edition. Till then, have a great weekend.